And we are live. So today, guys, welcome, welcome, welcome. It's your girls, Keisha and Ivy, and we're here again live from your favorite and only Chat, Chew, and You show, the interactive wellness show where it's all about promoting self-care, holistic health, and confident, energetic living. And today we're talking about food. Yum, right? Well, maybe not. Not what you're thinking. We are chatting about food from the angle of eating disorders and intuitive eating. And our special guest, Lauren, who Ivy will introduce in a second, is going to school us all about both. So just to let you know, first, anytime during the show, send us your comments, your questions, your feedback, and we'll address them. If you're on the Google Plus page, you can have them there. You can also use the Q&A box that send us your questions, or if you're watching on YouTube, you can send us your questions and feedback over there as well. Before we get to the show, just wanted to let you know, the name of the show is Chat, Chew, and You. So let's see what you're chewing on. Let us know what you're doing, but then also let's find out what we are chewing on. And actually, I'm slacking again this week. I so apologize. So I'm going to skip me and go right on over to Ivy. Ivy, what you got tonight?
Well, everybody, this is actually can be included in our topic for tonight with listening to your body. So I'm having some tummy issues tonight, so I'm holding off on eating anything else, and we might be able to talk about why later. But I'm actually just sipping on some mineral water because it's nice and fizzy, and it's going to help settle my stomach without all, like, for me, without all the sugary issues of like ginger ale and stuff, because that just makes it worse. So I'm just sipping for tonight, everybody.
And I'm not chewing either because I'm waiting for dinner. So, but I have some water with lemon.
Okay, we'll take that. At least we all have our liquids, right?
Right. We're having more like a sip and speak.
There you go. Name of today's show. All right, Ivy, would you like to introduce the fabulous Lauren?
Yes, absolutely. Lauren Cash is our featured guest for today, and I'm so excited to have her be here. I just want to read you a little bit from her bio so you can get to know a little bit about her, and then I'm actually going to let her tell you more about her brand, what she does, and her passion. Lauren is a positive body image blogger with a background in psychology, which I like because I'm a psych background as well. She's currently working on her master's degree in nutritional science in order to become a registered dietitian nutritionist. She believes that we are whole beings, and thus our physical and mental health intertwine, and both are essential for health. Instead of traditional dieting, Lauren supports approaches like intuitive eating. Her blog, which is Breathe and Nourish, helps others find realistic ways to get comfortable in their own skin while striving to be their best selves. And now you know why she's here, because these are all the things that we love here in the Chat, Chew, and You. We already had we had a recent episode talking about the issues with dieting a few months ago, and of course we're always talking about loving ourselves and being connected with ourselves and how that intertwines with our wellness. So Lauren, we're so excited to have you be a part of our show. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here. So Breathe and Nourish is my blog, and you already kind of talked about it. Eventually I hope it will be my private practice as well after I finish becoming an RD or RDN too. So, but that'll be in a couple of years, but I also have my master's in psychology. So that's a little bit about me and what I do on Breathe and Nourish.
Awesome. So Lauren, can you, just to kind of warm up the conversation, can you tell us a little bit about what attracted you to the topic of intuitive eating? Like, why did this become your passion?
So eating disorders were the first passion. So I had a friend that struggled with an eating disorder in college, and at the time I didn't really know much at all about eating disorders. and she hadn't told very many people about it. So I really wanted to be a good friend to her, and so I just started reading everything I could get my hands on about eating disorders and how to be a good friend. So from there, I decided I really could connect with that struggle, even though I didn't have a diagnosable eating disorder of my own. So then from there, I decided I wanted to study psychology, and so I went into a clinical psychology program. But then from there, decided maybe not that, but I also want to get my degree in nutrition and do it more from that angle. And then while I was in grad school, I was introduced to intuitive eating, and so that's been a personal journey for me, as well as what I want to use in my future private practice.
Actually, that's a nice little transition, and to go. It is all in the same area. I think all of what you're doing helps you become, a better coach, mentor, friend, all that good stuff with the knowledge that you'll attain by the time you get done with all your acronyms, RDNs.
I know, too many acronyms.
So let's start off our conversation tonight, ladies, by talking about, first of all, what does it mean to have an eating disorder? I know one of the things is that when we see a lot of times the way it's commercialized or the images that we have in our head, we may envision a certain age or gender or culture of person, but it affects all different types of people. So what does it actually mean to have an eating disorder? Lauren, can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so to actually have an eating disorder, it means that you've been diagnosed by a mental health professional, usually a psychologist, and it means that you've met certain requirements that are put out in this big book called the DSM. Now it's version 5, and so it means that you meet those criteria. But you also have to keep in mind that even if you don't have a diagnosable eating disorder, you could still have disordered eating, which can still be a problem and affect your life.
Yeah, I'm glad that you pointed out the difference between the two, because you might not have the official diagnosis, but you might still have disordered eating. Now, can you explain what disordered eating would mean, just to make sure that our audience is getting clarity on that? What would disordered eating look like?
So disordered eating can be a variety of things. It's basically just defined as being different than normal eating, which we still all kind of debate what normal is, but it's what a majority of people in the normative population would do under a certain time, circumstance. Like overeating is more normative during Thanksgiving. So if someone were to eat more than normal during Thanksgiving, it wouldn't necessarily be disordered eating, but it could be disordered eating in a different setting. And then also, like, disordered eating could be that you can only eat one type of food and before another type of food. You can't mix your foods, or there's a variety of different behaviors that could be disordered eating.
Okay. And that would be by, when you say that you can't, that would be more a person that's making the choice, not because of like a medical condition as to why they can't do
I mean, it still could originate from mental health. Like, people could need to control the way they eat by to cope with anxiety, say, by using their eating patterns, and so it could just not fall under the specific criteria laid out by the DSM, but it's similar.
Okay. Okay.
I have a quick question too while we're talking about this. Earlier you mentioned if the person is diagnosed with an eating disorder, then of course you have one. But what about without having to go to a professional or a doctor, or maybe those who can't go, don't have the money for it, or what have you? Those little tests online, are those accurate at all? You know how you can go online and say, do you have an eating disorder? You answer these questions.
Well, you can't know for sure unless someone is a mental health professional can assess you, but you can have a good idea. But part of having an eating disorder is that, at least for like anorexia, which we'll get into the different types, is that you don't, one of the criteria can be that you don't see a problem with what you're doing. And so that's difficult then to diagnose because you don't really see a problem with it.
Gotcha.
But yeah, there is a good self-assessment tool online as well. I don't have it right now, but I think it's like the EAT something. But that's good to know if you should seek mental health professionals' help.
That was a good question, Keisha, because you know, a lot of times people might not have gone for the psychological evaluation.
Yes, for sure.
Well, you had mentioned anorexia, Lauren, so can we go ahead and open up the conversation and start talking about the various types of eating disorders?
Yeah, so right now, according to the DSM-5, there are 3 major ones and then another kind of like catch-all category that has different types. So the first one is anorexia nervosa, and that one is typically characterized by a significantly low weight. So that's the one you usually see characterized by like really bone-thin people, but not necessarily always that appearance. I'm just talking about generalizations here too, so it can appear differently for different people, and I don't want to put people in a box, but I'm just saying normally this is what is seen. And there's an intense fear of gaining weight, maybe because of the shape, but also just as a way to control. It doesn't have to necessarily be that you want to have this perfect body, but you're trying to control your life through that, maybe. And there's also just a disturbance in the way that you see yourself, and you place an extra amount of value on your external appearance, more so than an average person would. So that's the same in kind of across the eating disorders, is that your body and shape, physical appearance, and all of that is significantly tied to your self-esteem in a way that's different than the normal population. Like, we still use that for self-esteem, but it's not held as tightly. So then there's there can be 2 different types too of anorexia nervosa. So there's the binge purge type and also the restrictive type. So binge purge type is that sometimes they binge and purge, but it's not the same as bulimia, so it gets a little confusing, and people cross over diagnoses often, like between anorexia and bulimia. So it all gets kind of wishy-washy. So we'll go over bulimia nervosa then is characterized by binging and purging doesn't necessarily have to be making yourself throw up. You could compensate for the extra food that you've binged on by exercising or using laxatives, stuff like that. Oh, and to define a binge, too, is that you eat more food in a short, defined amount of time than a normal person would do in that specific set of circumstances, and you also feel like a lack of control over doing that. So there's like kind of a couple of layers to the binge, rather than we just toss around like binging on Netflix, but it's really different than just a large quantity of whatever. And then there's binge eating disorder, and that is the binging without the purging, so you don't compensate for the extra intake. And then the kind of catch-all that I was telling you about, it used to be called EDNOS, and now it's OSFED, which stands for other specific feeding and eating disorders. Sorry, I had to like double check. And so that could be atypical anorexia. So you could be experiencing similar anorexia nervosa criteria, but you don't meet the weight requirement. There's subthreshold of bulimia nervosa, and then also of binge eating disorder. So it's like you're almost to that criteria, but not quite. But there's definitely like a problem and you need to get help. And there's also purging disorder that's different than the binge purge. And then there's night eating syndrome. So,
now, can I ask, one of the things that came to mind for me was with the OzFed. Maybe you can clarify this for me? Would this be, for example, maybe a larger body person who does anorexic behavior but doesn't actually meet like the weight criteria for anorexia?
Yeah.
Okay.
Could be.
Okay. And now orthorexia, which is not actually on the DSM-5, but it's recognized as something that we should be aware of. Could you actually, are you able to expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I actually participated in a tweet chat with the Academy for Eating Disorders about orthorexia, I think last week or the week before. So orthorexia is similar to anorexia nervosa in the fact that it's very restrictive and that interferes with your social life and how you feel about yourself when you kind of mess up. It's very black and white, kind of like anorexia, but you don't necessarily have the intense fear about weight gain. You're more concerned about eating the purest, healthiest foods. But when you do that, so if you're eating salad all day, every day, because you think that has the highest nutrient density of any food, you end up being deficient in a lot of nutrients we need as humans, like fat deficiencies. You need carbohydrates. Yeah, there are some in salad, but not nearly enough of what we need. So that's kind of an overview of orthorexia.
And one of the reasons that this, like for me personally, stuck out was because in our society, particularly in the American society, like we're becoming very focused and very obsessed with healthy food, and there's like the war on obesity and all of that. So a lot of people are like, oh, I don't eat carbs, or I don't eat, and not saying that those people fall into orthorexia, but sometimes people can go overboard with becoming really concerned with like the good and bad foods and the dirty and clean foods, to where I know when I was looking at it during National Eating Disorders Awareness Week, it was saying, you know, if it's affecting like your socialization, to where it's like, oh, I can't even go to this party because there's not going to be any clean food there for me to eat, or there's going to be too many carbs, and you know, and it becomes like this obsession. That's where you get into the danger zone with it. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're not going to be able to even eat with friends, really, if you couldn't go out to eat most of the time because where they're going probably doesn't have necessarily the foods that you feel safe eating. Also, yeah, like you were saying, like as a culture, we just continue to make foods bad. So now we're like cutting out sugar completely. We did carbs, we did fat. Now we're like picking on other things, like people going gluten-free when they don't even have celiac and all of that. So we just keep, that's not okay, that's not okay. So what does that leave us with? There's like no really like safe food except for kale.
Well, you know what? That's going to get a bad name after a while.
Yeah. If you just eat kale, you're not going to be very healthy.
Coincidentally, I was on Facebook yesterday and I saw a post talking about how kale is bad for you and it has like this chemical in it and you need to stop eating it. I was like, what?
We can't make up our minds, so.
And that's why, and you know what, Ivy, you mentioned earlier that, you know, people really don't know. That's why we don't know anything, because we have so much of this expert advice.
Yeah.
Right? All over the place. And they're all contradicting each other. And
well,
in the end, huh?
I was just going to say, like, case in point, like, eggs have always been like, good, bad, back and forth all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They keep messing with my favorite thing now. They gotta leave my eggs alone. Yeah, so that's why we're all confused, and So speaking of which, when I say we're confused, I think that's why we have more people now who have, if they're not eating, have an eating disorder, then I think they have disordered eating, right? So what have you seen in terms of, we don't have to call out stats or anything, but there is a rise, isn't it, on the number of people who have eating disorders now? And then, and you also just talk about the cases between men and women. And if we're seeing more men and not just women with an eating disorder.
Yeah, we are seeing more men with eating disorders as well. Now there's so much more placed on men to have the perfect, muscular body. CrossFit's a big thing, and I feel like that can cause disordered, even like exercising for men too. But yeah, men can get anorexia as well, which is why in DSM-5 they took out, in the previous DSM, you had to have stopped menstruating in order to be diagnosed with anorexia, but that would mean that men can't get it.
Right.
So, or be diagnosed with it. Yeah.
That's interesting. So everybody's affected, not just women anymore. Sorry, guys. Yeah. welcome to the bandwagon.
Well, the good thing is that way now they can, get the treatment that they need. And, because as long as we were denying the fact that men have eating disorders and disordered eating, then they were kind of in the shadows and they were left without the treatment that they need. And, oftentimes men are also teased or they feel shame around eating disorder because it has been considered, oh, that's a woman's issue, So men a lot of times are made comfortable for binge eating because that's like a manly thing to do, right? Manly, the quotation marks, manly thing to do. But if you think of a man.
Oh, she froze.
Oh, no.
In that little stage. Well, you know what? Here's what I will say, guys. If there are any men listening, I will challenge you not to know that you have an eating disorder. But men, don't go to the doctor. So I need you guys to go to the doctor. Just, off GP. Just go to the dang on doctor. I know so many guys that just, I don't need to go to the doctor until like 40, 45. No, you need to go to the doctor. Just like we do.
Yes.
Get checked out. You never know. Okay, so here's a question for you while we wait for Ivy to unfreeze.
All right.
So what have you found, or what's the general population of those with eating disorders go through when, health-wise, when they have these types of things happening to them? What are they noticing?
Oh, okay. Like complications?
Yeah, and their lifestyle, like what, their health, all that good stuff. Like, what do we see there?
So, like, for anorexia, low weight, as we talked about already, eventually, when you're that low weight and not getting enough nutrients, you'll develop, like, this strange kind of arm hair, lanugo.
Yeah. I heard about that.
Yeah, like babies come out with. People who struggle with anorexia will get cold more easily, so usually they'll have like extra clothing on because, also to disguise their bodies, but also because they're cold. And then eventually there will be just imbalances with electrolytes and stuff that will complicate heart function and could lead to death as well. Ivy's back.
Yay, Yeah, we were just talking about some of the complications, just in general, their wellness, the overall health, what happens when they have these types of things happening with their bodies and they're having the eating disorder. I'm just trying to imagine outside of the mental issues, we talk about you with the psychology and all that good stuff we can talk about, but yeah, outside of that and wanting to have that control over your body in such a tight way, that it just hurts everything else. And I don't know if they're understanding that, with the help of a professional they can. But it's like, I don't know if they really understand how much more they're hurting themselves by going.
But it doesn't really matter to them a lot of the times, at least those that I've had relationships with, they are aware of the complications and what could happen, but the eating disorder is serving them in some way that's greater than the threat of what could happen.
Gotcha.
But I have known some that like had been binging and purging, but then they learned more about what that could do to their esophagus, and that the acid coming from your stomach could really interfere with your esophagus, and that scared them enough that they were like, okay, never mind, I'm just going to restrict.
Okay.
So, I mean, I've heard that sometimes, but yeah.
Now, what's the case with children? Our kids are coming up not just obese, but they have so many, things going on with them these days in terms of mental health.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I mean, they are just really messed up these days, in my opinion. What can we do to help our kids? I'm always interested in
I think the biggest thing is just displaying a healthy relationship with our own body and food, being great role models, and also exposing them to activities that can help them become more embodied and have a relationship with their body rather than just having body and self be separate. So like things like yoga or like sports and things which sometimes those can trigger eating disorder because of the culture. But I think learning to be a human with a body and learning to be grateful for what your body does for you is really helpful. But yeah, I think just modeling is a huge thing.
Makes sense. And anything that we do, we have to be good role models for our kids, guys. This is the generation that's going to be taking care of you. So I suggest you get well so they can be well.
Yeah. And also we do, I mean, I don't have kids, but when I babysit, sometimes I see really interesting behaviors of parents telling their kids that they have to finish their plate and telling them things that go against their natural hunger and fullness cues, which goes into kind of the intuitive eating. When kids are born natural intuitive eaters, they know when they're hungry, they know when they're full, they'll eat when they're hungry. You don't have to worry about that. We also can work on introducing new foods, and when they don't like have them try it, and if they don't like it after like a bite, don't force them to eat it more, but just keep reintroducing it multiple times, and just have them taste it. And eventually they probably will end up liking it if you're not forcing them to finish it that day. At least that's what I've read in some studies about like vegetables and fruit, and having kids help prepare their meals also has been shown that they will then try new foods and enjoy fresh produce more as well.
I actually incidentally just had this conversation with my brother because my little niece, she is 3. We were all eating greens, and she's like, I don't want any greens. I'm like, well, have you ever eaten greens? I know she has because our family always cooks greens. So she's like, I don't want any greens. I don't like greens. So it's like, okay, don't make her eat them right now. Well, this is the discussion we had, so I'm glad you mentioned that. Don't make her eat them right now. Save it for later when no one's here and when she's hungry. Either I bet she eats them or she'll find something else. And introduce other vegetables. And my brother's like, she doesn't like vegetables. So what kind of vegetables did you have her taste in? I was like, all the vegetables in the world. She doesn't like any vegetables.
There are a lot of veggies.
Right. So I'm glad you mentioned that as far as reintroducing or introducing new foods.
Like we can even teach ourselves as adults to like foods that we don't think we like. Like I didn't used to like peanut butter, and I was able to. I know. And I was able to actually train myself to like it I started with sunflower butter, went to almond butter, then went to peanut butter, and now I like it. So
yeah.
Peanut
I found the
butter
same
staple.
thing with. I'm sorry, Keisha. Go ahead.
I was just saying peanut butter is a staple in my house.
It usually is. It's a weird one not to like, but.
I was just saying that I found the same thing. Like, I grew up eating, being served kale, and I hated kale. Like, you see how much passion was behind that. But as an adult, like, especially when I started my journey with, just eating more fresh vegetables and things like that, I started cooking my own kale. And what I realized was that I disliked kale the way that I was served it growing up, which was, it was cooked to death, where it was like, just limp on the on the plate. And I actually, when I cook it myself now, I like it where it's still a little bit of texture in it. It might be a little crunchy, and I like peppers and onions and those things, and I still like my peppers and onions and things to be a little crunchy too. So, if I get it where it's really, really limp, I don't like it. So possibly it was a texture thing, but I was saying that to say that sometimes the same vegetable cooked in a different way can, be more appealing. Like, if some people don't like really, really soft broccoli. Some people just like it steamed, and some people don't like the crunchy factor. They do like it softer. So sometimes with children, it could be cooking it in different ways that the vegetable or the food might be more appealing.
Yeah.
Exactly. Just like I eat sweet potatoes, but I don't like them. I don't like to eat them like mashed potatoes. I don't like the consistency of it that way. I have to cut them up really small and bake them, and that's the only way I like them.
So isn't that interesting how, like, it's just a matter of not really the food. Sometimes we can be quick to say, oh, they don't like that, but it could be the presentation or the consistency of the way the food is prepared.
And you know what, Lauren? It's funny that you mentioned the fact that we force feed our kids, and I'm wondering, well, I guess we can go back in history and understand why we were made to eat everything on our plates. I think we all know where that may come from. But yeah, I went through that same thing when we were all younger. It's like, you don't throw away food. And not until I got older did I read something one time that really was just like, oh my God, why didn't I know this as a child so I could tell people? It basically said, would you rather have you be the trash can or the actual trash can be the trash can? So I am putting this food in my body. Either I don't want it or I don't need it or it doesn't work for me, but I am using my body as a trash can to throw it away. And so when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, I could have been telling parents and adults back in the day, do you want to use me as a trash can? I don't know if that would have flown, but
probably not.
I would have sounded like I was smart though.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was really interesting to see it that way.
And also, I guess I get as like a parent, like if your kid isn't hungry at dinner time, it can be annoying to be like, oh, we're going to have to eat later. Or you could come up to me like, well, I'm doing dishes and you're hungry then. But I think teaching the cues is helpful for a longer period of time. And eventually they'll learn to like be hungry earlier than dinner time and wait to have dinner with the family because of the social environment, and that's greater for like the family, but that takes a little while to like train that too. There's a balance between the listening to your body and then also having the social norms go with that.
So can you, this is an awesome segue into intuitive eating.
Yeah.
Can you go ahead and expound a little bit on intuitive eating and how those fullness and hunger cues tie into intuitive eating?
Yeah, so Intuitive Eating is a book by Evelyn Trimble and Elise Reich. I have it right here. And it is a non-diet approach to eating. And there are 10 principles. So I don't know them all off the top of my head, but it's really based on listening to your body and your body's hunger and fullness cues. So eating when you're hungry and stopping eating when you're full. And really learning to figure out when you're actually hungry and when you're just eating to fulfill another need, and working on fulfilling your needs, like needing comfort and getting comfort somewhere else other than food. And then also doing movement for pleasure and for feeling good in your body rather than trying to get like the negative calories to burn off what you just ate and things like that. So yeah, it's just pretty much getting back to how we were as kids.
How can we tap into that? I mean, it sounds so simple, right? It seems like we complicate things often. It sounds really simple. Are there any tricks or tips or strategies also that we can really learn to do that on our own?
Yeah, so I would say learning to not eat, well, I'll give you an example for fullness cues. Eating without like watching TV or reading or being on your phone, you'll learn your fullness cues a lot better if you're just eating or eating and conversing with people. If you are not multitasking. And then also serving yourself a smaller portion on your plate, and then eating that, finishing, waiting like 10, 15 minutes, and checking in with yourself to see, am I really still hungry or not? Because it takes a while for us to know for sure if we're full or not. And then, well, I guess I like the thing that even if the food still sounds really good and you want more but you're full, being able to tell yourself that you can have leftovers at another meal and enjoy it another time when you're actually hungry, and you actually will enjoy the food better when you're hungry because our taste is much more sensitive when we're hungry than when we're full.
Oh, that's something new. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so you'll enjoy it more.
I know something that I read and it really resonated with me around intuitive eating was that the emotional eating portion, which a lot of us deal with, which is like, eating because we feel bad or even eating because we feel good. Like, oh, I'm feeling great. I want to celebrate food.
That's me. That's me.
Or, I feel sucky, food. That is the mind. But the hunger cues come from the body. And so when we're learning the mind-body connection, it's learning that the body is hungry and teaching basically the mind to tune in and to connect with the body and basically to submit to the body, because the body knows. And that's something that I didn't until I really got into body relationship, years ago. I never thought about it, was that when we were created, for years, hundreds, thousands of years ago, people didn't have like these diet programs that teach you how to like count points and calories. And people ate because they knew that they were hungry and they stopped when they were, but somehow we've become so dependent on these external, like Keisha said, the external experts to tell us when to eat, how much to eat, when to stop eating, what types of foods to eat. But our body knows. It's just a lot of times we're ignoring our body because we feel that these external sources know better. And so we'll take their advice over our own body. And a lot of that has to do with body trust, trusting.
We don't trust our body.
Exactly. Can you expound on that a little bit more? I'm sure with you talking around intuitive eating, that's something that you talk about as well, Lauren.
Yeah, I do. I talk about that a lot. That we're taught that we shouldn't trust our bodies, and it starts with the parent-child conversations that we were talking about. Like if your parent is telling you you need to finish the plate, you're being told to silence your body's cues. And so it starts at that very early age of, oh, I must be wrong about this. I have to eat more. And then we just stuff that down. And then we also learn to eat past our fullness cues, because either maybe we lived in a big family and you didn't get food unless you like ate as much as you could right then at that time, or it would be gone. So we're just taught not to listen to them. And then dieting, of course, where's listening to your body and dieting? You're just a number. Your BMI is put into a thing, and then you calculate your calories, and then you're only counting calories, which it's just one number, and it's not taking into account how very diverse we are, and also all the various nutrients we need, and also that we do eat for taste and pleasure, and there's mental health to be accounted for as well.
Yeah. What about, I know Keisha brought up children, and that's been coming up, and it's important because that's where our first food relationship starts. But what about punishing and rewarding with food, and how that sets us up for this lifelong relationship with food?
Yeah, so a lot of parents will tell you that you can't eat dinner because you did X, Y, and Z wrong. That has nothing to do with food, and send you to your room, and you can't eat food until you apologize, or maybe not even until the next morning because you're being punished. So you learn to punish yourself in that way as well, that you have to withhold food. And then we reward ourselves with food, like we were talking about, like celebrating with food. And even when kids, like we start at an early age as well, like when kids are crying and maybe they skin their knee or something, it's normal, like in our culture, to be like, oh, here, have some ice cream, it'll make it better. And so,
right.
like, and then we learn from that early age, like, oh, I'm having a bad day, like, I have to go treat myself to this food or that food, even when I'm not necessarily hungry for that. Or I just had, like, something really sweet earlier today, and I don't really want that again. I mean, maybe you do want it again, and that's great. You can have it again. But a lot of the times it's related to the circumstances rather than what's going on in our bodies. But we also have to be careful to let ourselves off the hook when we're not perfect intuitive eaters too. Like, it's normal to treat ourselves to something every once in a while. And we should, like, it's just as bad to beat ourselves up over that as well. Like, that's not healthy either. So there's this balance of learning intuitive eating, but then also forgiving ourselves and not feeling guilty for when we've lost that. And there's always the next meal you can try again.
So when I eat that whole roll of Oreos, I should be okay. Just say.
Just move on. Move on. There's always the next meal. You'll try again.
I can say, for me personally, that like learning to disassociate, for me personally, it was the reward and punishment with food. And so it was like, okay, you know, I remember being in school, and it's like if you did really well, then like the teacher had cookies or something.
Oh, yeah, that's true too. You know, yeah.
It would be like, hey, you guys have been so awesome. I brought you in cookies, or you could get something like off of her desk. There was like a jar of like candy or something.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
You know, I came up in like the late 70s, early 80s, so I mean the rules for children was totally different than they are now.
I even remember like going to the dentist or doctor too, and like if you did a good job, you got candy.
A lollipop, yeah. Or you know, you go to the bank and like they have lollipops there for kids. I mean, it's like, you know, it's like food was always used for you've been good, you get sweet food. So no wonder you grow. And I realized this pattern in myself, that it was like, okay, I associate sweet foods with, you've been good. So it's like if I accomplish something, even when I was on a dieting roller coaster, it was like, okay, I lost 20 pounds. I finally got into the size I wanted to. I'm going to get what I want to eat now because I've deprived myself of anything sweet for 3 months. And now, I feel like I should reward myself with food, and then the whole cycle starts again because you trigger, your tongue is like, oh, haven't had sugar in a while, and the next thing you know, you're off that roller coaster, and that's disordered eating relationship with food. So once I learned that, for me, I learned how to use other things to experience pleasure and the sense of reward. So it would be, oh, I'm going to get my favorite soap or get lotion or get a massage or something else as a reward, so I could kind of break that cycle for myself.
Yeah, that's really important. And also, like, you have to learn that even when you don't feel like you're good, you can have something sweet if you feel like something sweet, because before there was no place for that unless you fulfilled like certain criteria. And that's another thing about intuitive eating, you help me remember, is that it goes against the whole dieting thing, which when you're dieting, you're restricting and you're not allowing yourself to have certain foods or a certain amount of foods that you might actually need in your body. So then you're going to go out and want to overeat because you've been restricting so much, and then your body's going to want so much. But when we intuitively eat, we keep that more even rather than the like roller coaster like you were talking about.
I like the even path. I don't like the roller coaster path anymore.
It's not fun, and it's harder to be nice to yourself when you're doing that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, you know what?
So
here's
if we
another question.
Go ahead, Keisha. Go ahead.
Okay. Question is, what do we do if we think someone we know has an eating disorder? Outside of just calling the hotline or something like that. I mean, seriously, what can we do to help support them or help them understand what they're doing, or get them from the denial phase to, yeah, maybe along this path? What are some things we can do?
It's really challenging. Super challenging to be a friend of someone struggling with an eating disorder, especially if they don't know that they might have a problem with food. And it's a really touchy subject too, because sometimes when you approach them about it, if it's recognized, sometimes that can even make them feel like they're achieving what they want to be achieving, and it could send them into doing it even more, which is not what you want either. So it's really challenging. But I would say if it's someone you're really close to, making it about you and your concern for them is a really great way to go, rather than just placing blame on them, and then they're probably going to get defensive. So I would just say that I'm concerned about you. I've been seeing X, Y, and Z. Are you doing okay? Like, how are you doing? And asking them that more than making it about food. And maybe they won't even open up to you, but just letting them know that you're there and you're concerned is really important. Also, we talked about NEDA, National Eating Disorder Awareness. They have a really great sheet on their website for if you have a friend struggling with an eating disorder, and it gives you kind of like a lowdown of tips of what you could do. So I would say look at that first too before you have a conversation with them.
And what's that website again?
I think it's NEDA.org.
.org. Yeah.
Okay.
Which I can actually, I'll put that on the screen.
No, that's not it. That is a different website. Hold on. I know NEDA Awareness is the national. Oh, it's nationaleatingdisorders.org.
Okay. I'll put that up on the screen for anyone who wants. connection. So since Lauren, it's been awesome having you here and giving us so much information and knowledge.
Thanks so much for having me. Oh, one more resource. If you have a friend or a loved one, I have this book here. I don't really love the title, but if you ignore the title, it's a really great book to educate yourself. It's called Almost Anorexic, and it's the subtitle is my or my loved one's relationship with food a problem? And it's a really great book, and it was written recently, so it's based on the DSM-5, and it's a really good way to be introduced to eating disorders if you think you might be struggling or if you think someone you love is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And can you show us the Intuitive Eating book again also so that the audience can see that as a resource?
No, sorry, it's blurry. There, kind of.
There we go.
These in the notes.
So how can our audience stay connected to you? We have your website up, but do you have anything that's coming up or anything that's happening right now as resources?
Yeah, so they can go to my website, but also I have, well, they'd see on my website I have an ebook about figuring out how to know when you're hungry, and then also how to not ditch nutrition when you're intuitively eating. And so I decided for our watchers today I'd give them a coupon code too. So that's this website. If you go here, you'll get it with the % off.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You all are getting a gift from Lauren.
Thank you, Lauren.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, and guys, we'll have the link all over the place, so you don't have to worry about writing it down or anything like that. We'll post the links on, we already post the links in the Google Plus comment section, so you can get those there as well.
Lauren, was there anything else that you needed to share that comes to mind that we didn't talk about that you definitely want our audience to know?
We just touched on a little bit about populations that are overlooked, but let's just capture that really quickly. So we talked about men, also ages. There's a misconception that usually like 18 or like teenagers, 16 to like 20-somethings are who struggle with eating disorders, but people who are going through life changes also could experience an eating disorder and be triggered or even relapse, like women going through menopause and things like that. So we have to be careful not to just assume certain ages, and even we talked about earlier children having them at earlier ages. And also you can't tell if someone has an eating disorder just by looking at them, and that's a common misconception too, that if they're morbidly obese as defined by BMI, the body index, or if they're extremely skinny, that they're struggling with an eating disorder. There are some people that are thin genetically and they don't have an eating disorder, and we just don't know based on looking at someone. So don't assume something about someone based off of their weight. And also culturally, we commonly think of someone like me, Caucasian, female, and anyone from any background could struggle with an eating disorder as well. So it's not just what you see in a lot of posters and things like that.
Yeah, posters, right. Movies, all types of stuff. Everybody is affected that I've seen. Every culture, every nationality, all that.
Yes.
So I'm glad we're busting these myths.
Yeah.
You had something else?
I guess just intuitive eating, connecting that to eating disorders. Mm-hmm. It can be used in treatment, but it's kind of a step 2, I would say. You first need to learn how to eat on a schedule and become aware of your relationship with your body again and figure out what it's like to eat again in a more normal relationship with food before you can trust what your body sensations are doing, because you've disconnected so severely from your body in your relationship with your eating disorder that it'll take a while to get to the point of learning intuitive eating. So I would work with a treatment team and an RD to figure out when that might be okay for you to learn after you've been recovering from your eating disorder. But right away, it's not probably going to be the best idea for you, because you could still be listening to the eating disordered thoughts and feelings in your body rather than what your actual body needs.
That's a good point. I'm glad you mentioned that.
That's a really good warning. So they really need to work on their body relationship before they can even hear the signals.
Yeah, and working with an RD to tell you, what you should. I mean, it's kind of like getting a schedule again of what you need to be eating, but you kind of need to be walked through that for a while first in order to learn what your body needs and reconnect.
That's really interesting. Very powerful. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
You've been awesome and definitely informative with all of this information that you shared with us, and hopefully this is going to be valuable. I know it's valuable for me. I learned even more, and it's always great to talk around these topics. Sometimes we tend to avoid them because they sometimes make people uncomfortable, or maybe people feel a certain sense of shame or embarrassment. But we do want you all to know that you never have to, which we always tell you, you never have to have any type of shame or guilt if you are struggling with your food or your body image. Definitely use the resources that we've given you today. You can always contact us at chatchewingyou.com, and if you have any questions, and you can contact Lauren as well if you'd like help with intuitive eating and eating disorders. What's most important is that you get the support that you need.
Mm-hmm.
Keisha, you have anything before we close out?
No, well said. Definitely, I was looking forward to this because I didn't really, you hear what you think eating disorders are and what intuitive eating is and all that good stuff. So I was really glad to hear you, Lauren, really talk about it from your expertise and experience. So thank you, darling.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and I will say, guys, our next show date is scheduled for 4/15, the second Wednesday of the month. So I know that's tax day, but I need you to go ahead and get those taxes in early, and I wait to the last minute. And topic is to be announced, though, so stay tuned. And if you want to be notified, just go to chatchewingyou.com so that you can get on the list. And we only notify you about events. You won't get a lot of mail and spam and all that bullcrap, so don't worry about it. But if you have any lingering questions, too, after the show, you didn't get a chance to submit them, or you didn't want to submit them publicly, please email us or get in touch with Lauren, again, like Ivy said, so that you can get the support you need.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
On a skip, we can go right on over to Ivy. Ivy, what you got tonight?
Well, everybody, this is actually can be included in our topic for tonight with listening to your body. So I'm having some tummy issues tonight, so I'm holding off on eating anything else, and we might be able to talk about why later. But I'm actually just sipping on some mineral water because it's nice and fizzy, and it's going to help settle my stomach without all, like, for me, without all the sugary issues of like ginger ale and stuff, because that just makes it worse. So I'm just sipping for tonight, everybody.
And I'm not chewing either because I'm waiting for dinner. So, but I have some water with lemon.
Okay, we'll take that. At least we all have our liquids, right?
Right. We're having more like a sip and speak.
There you go. Name of today's show, Sip and Speak. All right, Ivy, would you like to introduce the fabulous Lauren?
Yes, absolutely. Lauren Cash is our featured guest for a few months ago. And of course, we're always talking about loving ourselves and being connected with ourselves and how that intertwines with our wellness. So, Lauren, we're so excited to have you be a part of our show. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here. Yeah, so Breathe and Nourish is my blog, and you already kind of talked about it. Eventually, I hope it will be my private practice as well after I finish becoming an RD or RDN too. So, yeah, but that'll be in a couple of years. But I also have my master's in psychology. So that's a little bit about me and what I do on Breathe and Nourish.
Awesome. So, Lauren, can you, just to kind of warm up the conversation, can you tell us a little bit about what attracted you to the topic of intuitive eating? Like, why did this become your passion?
So eating disorders were the first passion. So I had a friend that struggled with an eating disorder in college, and at the time I didn't really know much at all about eating disorders. And she hadn't told very many people about it. So I really wanted to be a good friend to her. And so I just started reading everything I could get my hands on.
And I'm so excited to have her be here. I just want to read you a little bit from her bio so you can get to know a little bit about her. And then I'm actually going to let her tell you more about her brand, what she does, and her passion. Lauren is a positive body image blogger with a background in psychology, which I like because I'm a psych background as well. She's currently working on her master's degree in nutritional science in order to become a registered dietitian nutritionist. She believes that we are whole beings, and thus our physical and mental health intertwine, and both are essential for health. Instead of traditional dieting, Lauren supports approaches like intuitive eating. Her blog, which is Breathe and Nourish, helps others find realistic ways to get comfortable in their own skin while striving to be their best selves. And now you know why she's here, because these are all the things that we love here in the chat room with you. We already had we had a recent episode talking about the issues with dieting a few.
And we are live. So today, guys, welcome, welcome, welcome. It's your girls, Keisha and Ivy, and we're here again live from your favorite and only Chat, Chew, and You Show, the interactive wellness show where it's all about promoting self-care, holistic health, and confident, energetic living. And today we're talking about food. Yum, right? Well, maybe not. Not what you're thinking. We are chatting about food from the angle of eating disorders and intuitive eating. And our special guest, Lauren, who Ivy will introduce in a second, is going to school us all about both. So just to let you know, first, anytime during the show, send us your comments, your questions, your feedback, and we'll address them. If you're on the Google Plus page, you can have them there. You can also use the Q&A box that send us your questions. Or if you're watching on YouTube, you can send us your questions and feedback over there as well. Before we get to the show, just wanted to let you know, the name of the show is Chat, Chew, and You. So let's see what you're chewing on. Let us know what you're doing, but then also let's find out what we are chewing on. And actually, I'm slacking again this week. I so apologize. So I'm
about eating disorders and how to be a good friend. So from there, I decided I really could connect with that struggle, even though I didn't have a diagnosable eating disorder of my own. So then from there, I decided I wanted to study psychology, and so I went into a clinical psychology program. But then from there, decided maybe not that, but I also want to get my degree in nutrition and do it more from that angle. And then while I was in grad school, I was introduced to intuitive eating. And so that's been a personal journey for me, as well as what I want to use in my future private practice.
Actually, that's a nice little transition, you know, to go. It is all in the same area. I think all of what you're doing helps you become, you know, a better coach, mentor, friend, all that good stuff with the knowledge that you'll attain by the time you get done with all your acronyms, RDNs.
I know, too many acronyms.
So let's start off our conversation tonight, ladies, by talking about, first of all, what does it mean to have an eating disorder? I know one of the things is that